Okay, so what the heck happened to me? Well, over the last couple of years, I have had some chronic shoulder pain, and even though I've tried everything, including physical therapy, acupuncture, massage, everything you can think of, cortisone shots, I ended up finally having surgery on my right shoulder. But this isn't a woe is me video. I just wanted to explain where I've been, but more importantly, a really interesting skill set that I learned that has to do with singing and what it can mean for your journey as a singer. So one thing that I knew was going to be a huge challenge was this stupid 1.5 octave arpeggio that I use in every single lesson with every single student that I teach. The 1.5 octave arpeggio has so many incredible benefits for the singer. The spaces between the notes, and in other words, the jumps and the different degrees that the scale moves up, go up by thirds and fourths, which is really, really great in case someone's really straining to get to the top part of their voice, because there's no part of their voice they can get too hung up on. Bigger jumps mean bigger changes in your voice. Whereas instead of, if I chose a scale that was really, really close together, it's really, really easy to strain that because the notes aren't jumping a whole lot. But you change that to a or like and all of a sudden you'll notice that your voice makes a lot more changes more quickly because the notes are jumping around. Now you may have noticed that I did a nice little trick there and I made this look easy, but the biggest thing that I was afraid of for this surgery and what it meant for my job was actually being able to play that 1.5 octave arpeggio one-handed. Typically, I'll play the 1.5 octave arpeggio two-handed using my right hand for the second part of the octave. And this is really, really helpful and important because it's not actually just the same notes going up as they are coming down. The notes actually change completely moving down, a little bit like a song does. So even before I went into the surgery, I knew that I was gonna have to master this 1.5 octave arpeggio with one hand, my left hand, which I am not left-handed. I am absolutely right-handed. And so I knew it was gonna take me a while to learn. What I had no way of knowing was that it was going to be very, very difficult. Almost like learning how to play a completely new instrument, like singing. And so learning how to play this 1.5 octave arpeggio one-handed really taught me all the steps of learning a brand new skill. And so if you're just starting off with singing or you've been doing it for a while, but you feel really, really stuck, I wanna show you the 5 steps to a new skill level mastery, especially when it comes to playing music. But I thought this was gonna be so easy because after all, since I already start with my left hand, I figured just adding a couple extra notes was gonna be easy. The problem with that was once you go up past that octave, you have to cross over your thumb. And then as you start heading back down, you cross again. This leads to a feeling of complete disorientation when building this brand new skill, and basically erases everything that I knew about piano playing up to this point. And I see this happen with singers a whole lot of the time. Maybe they've been singing for a while, they come in for a lesson and I ask them to do something completely different in their voice, like maybe do a nay, 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 or a no, 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 no. And they're used to singing everything really pretty and light. No, 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 no. And so doing something like this that's like, very ugly, or maybe has an unfinished quality to it, or even doesn't sound good, frankly, a totally new sound. They're like, I didn't take a voice lesson to sound worse. But sometimes you have to actually go through that process of taking a step backward and learning how to do something all over again in order to get better at it. And that was certainly the case with me learning how to play this arpeggio. Which leads me to the first step. Everything is awkward AF. At first, learning how to play this scale, it was like every single note was just a trip. And then I would play the wrong notes and I would just feel super discouraged. And I think a part of that reason is because you just feel like completely disoriented on the keyboard when you're lifting up your hands and changing that many times. The same thing may be true when you're learning how to sing something and you're doing a scale or something or a sound or an exercise that feels completely foreign and unnatural to you. And you kind of feel like you take a step back even. Now, this was especially true on the black keys. For example, the key of F sharp or the key of B, that both of them have a lot of sharps in them, and learning how to play on all those black keys and feel secure was super challenging, and I had to go ultra slow. And again, everything was super shaky. Most of the time, I barely even made it through the scale. But you just have to persevere. This leads you to step 2, sounding slightly less crappy. We're not going light speed yet. We're still just every single day, just going painstakingly slow and still making issues where you start and where you end is just awful. But the important thing is that you just keep doing it every single day. Just set aside a little bit of time to sing or try some new exercise every single day. The goal here is consistency. Even if it's just 15 minutes, make sure that it's a good 15 minutes every day. I take that back. It doesn't even have to be a good 15 minutes. Just do 15 minutes every single day consistently. Step 3, woodshed. Now, it's kind of interesting because in step 3, this is where technique is actually really going to start to appear. Before, in our earlier steps, you're really just mashing your fingers down on the keys in order, trying not to mess up. You're not really consciously focusing on any technique or anything like that yet. Now, I was actually really lucky in this case because one of my good friends and colleagues, Spencer Welch of the Institute for Vocal Advancement, I remembered a few years ago, he had some issue with his arm. I think he had broken his arm. And I remember a video that he shot where he was playing the scale one-handed. So I knew he could do it, and I knew he would kind of, empathize with my pain. And so I asked him if he wouldn't mind shooting a couple-minute video showing me how to actually play the scale. And that was super, super important because even in some of these scales and some of the keys, we're following a general pattern. But, for example, in the key of B flat, I start with my pinky on the low note, but I actually end using a totally different finger. And I have to keep that in mind every single time I do it. But luckily, Spencer was able to make me aware of some of the potential potholes that I was going to run into and where technique was really going to help me. In this particular case, one of the most important things that I learned was that the return note, the note where my thumb actually went back under the keys on the way back down, was probably the most important thing for me to pay attention to. So I'm going up the scale. I'm not really thinking about it too much. I am thinking a lot right here, because you'll notice that that is a huge switch that I have to make. So all the way from this awkward note on my third finger, all the way down to the thumb right there. So even though that's just a major third, it's still a big stretch between the thumb and the third finger there. And so I really started focusing about 80% of my energy on that. And that goes back to the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your results really come from 20% of your efforts, meaning that you're gonna focus mostly on that return note and the other notes should start to fill in themselves. I see this all the time with my singers. Rather than having that nay, 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 where you're going through basically in just kind of one blitz, instead, they're kind of staying in their head voice, nay, 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 and having a big old thing on the bottom. And that's actually kind of similar to what I was experiencing with my thumb. I had to make such a big change with my thumb. But once you start to focus 80% of your focus and energy on that return note, that actually the whole scale gets better. So in the case of that singer, they might have to focus on keeping it a little bit more bratty as they're coming down. Nay, 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 nay. And just that focus helps them keep a little bit of a better and smoother result. This leads us to step 4, where I learned that first, you're gonna go super slow and then speed it up. In my particular case, I was really lucky because my piano already has a built-in metronome. And so I would play along just trying to match every single note. Now, the goal here was obviously to match the note that I'm supposed to be playing. In other words, not play any wrong notes, but it's also not to speed ahead of the metronome or slow down too much. And there's something kind of really difficult about doing something super slow, just maybe as much as doing something too fast. Because when you're moving too fast, you can forgive a lot of mistakes. But when you're moving so slow and so deliberately, you can't help but pay attention to every little mistake or error that you make. And it's like your brain becomes aware of the space between each one of the notes, and you're attempting to kind of play the note before you even get to it. Here's me doing it at 80 BPM. It's so hard to play it that slow. Oh my God. You're like, are we ever gonna get there? And then I would do it at a more normal speed, like 120. Then even faster, like 150. Okay, and this is 200. It is so fast. This case, you're basically just trying to go as fast as you can without screwing anything up. Now, speed isn't something that's incredibly important in the same way in singing as it is in piano, unless you're working on something like a riff or a run or something like that, where it helps to start it really, really slow and then speed it up until it gets really fast like the original recording. Instead, with singing, it's much more important to become aware of the vowel, the sound, the tone, the pitch, and the rhythm that you're singing at to make sure that those are matching up with the original song and the recording. And just like I'm not trying to go faster than I'm actually capable of going, you should really work on songs and exercises that are still just slightly within your limits and then just slightly stretching and expanding from there. There's gonna be plenty of times where I sped up that metronome and I wasn't totally ready for it, and then I had to slow it down a little bit until I was able to get to that point again. And that leads us to step 5, mastery. So I had my surgery on April the 8th of 2025. And by May the 9th of 2025, I wrote down a note to myself that I felt that I had finally mastered playing the 1.5 octave arpeggio scale. So that's essentially 1 month, exactly. And people talk a whole lot about how it takes 28 days to form a new habit, but I was curious about how long it was gonna take me to learn a brand new skill, like how to play this arpeggio at a really, really fast pace that I could actually play in real time with my students in the room with me or online on Zoom. And I knew that I had to get to about 200 BPM to be able to match the typical playing speed that I'll use at the fastest with my students. So for me, learning this new skill took about exactly 1 month. Now, I certainly had a leg up in that I had a fantastic teacher that I could reach out to and be like, hey, can you show me the technique for how you actually learned how to finger these scales? I also had a leg up in that my brain is very musical, so I tend to pick up musical instruments quite well, a little bit slower at 38 than I did when I was 12 years old. And I also had a lot of time, I was in a sling, I was recovering, I was on a lot of pain meds, and I wasn't really thinking about a whole lot else. I wasn't seeing students in person for the first 2 weeks. So for any of you that are out there that are really struggling with singing, I would encourage you to get razor focused on what it is that's holding you back, and then set a plan in order to fix it. And maybe set yourself a time limit of, say, like 1 month to really, really work on that vocal break every single day, just really, really feeling the spacing between those notes. If you want a fantastic course to show you exactly what's holding you back and how to fix it, check out my complete singing course, Master Your Voice. It's the only one that features completely personalized feedback from me and video feedback every single month, as well as a custom roadmap on how to achieve your singing goals.